Okay, we're live on Dale. My name is John Henry Dale, and I'm here with election security advocate Jennifer Cohn, who has a fascinating and really pertinent Twitter feed filled with all kinds of information about the history of election security in the U.S. and what's happening right now in that field. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what got you into this.
Sure. Hi. It's great talking to you. So I am an attorney, and I had about 23 years of experience practicing law. The last 7, I was a partner at Nielsen Haley Abbott in Marin, California. I had stopped practicing law. I think it was about 2 years before the election, and I still have kids. They aren't as young as they were, but they were quite young at the time. And I was really mostly just being a mom. That was what I was doing, and really was not looking, frankly, for another career, or much less a professional career. So the 2016 election then hit, and like a lot of other people, I was really concerned that Trump was reported to have won the election, and that was sort of an unexpected outcome. Someone on Twitter asked for help researching voting machine audit laws. It was in connection, I think, with the Recount. And I wasn't especially even interested in voting machines per se, but I knew I had good research skills, so I agreed to do it. And fairly early, I came across a real discrepancy between what election officials and other people in these sort of government positions of trust were telling the public about our election systems, and what really respected election security experts with a less public profile were saying to be the case. And the two were very different, and I became very concerned. Initially, one of those things had to do with internet connectivity of systems. So we had, James Comey and other people testifying publicly that we didn't really have to worry about vote totals being changed because systems supposedly never connect to the internet. And then Professor Alex Halderman I think he's at the University of Michigan or Princeton, one or the other, he was saying that in reality, even if the voting machines themselves don't connect to the internet, they all receive programming before every election. They have to receive it from centralized county or state computers, and those systems often can and do connect to the internet, or they receive input from internet connected systems. So it's really very misleading to say, just because voting machines don't connect, that we don't have to worry. And then on top of it, later on, it turned out actually many of the precinct ballot scanners in swing states actually did connect to the internet. So those kinds of things really caught my interest early on, and I started writing about it on Twitter with really no intent to make my account anything special. But over time, people started asking me if I could put it into articles on Medium, and then a few news outlets asked me to start writing articles for them, and it kind of just grew, and I got a lot of radio shows asking me on, and podcasts and things.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like 156,000 Twitter followers.
Right.
I mean, that's really big for somebody, basically tweeting mostly about election security.
Out of nowhere. Well, yeah, what I think, I filled a hole. I actually want to just say what I think. People who've done this for a long time were sometimes baffled that my account took off the way it did, and I understand that. It's not often that, there have been some vulnerabilities that I've been the one who found it. Oftentimes, I'm just repeating what other people have found, but the way that our news system and media is set up is sort of one and done. So, breaking news, turns out the voting systems connect to the internet. One show, as far as I can tell, one television show, NBC News, Cynthia McFadden, did an expose, and I don't think any other TV did it because they don't want to repeat an old story. It's someone else's. But the problem doesn't go away. And so the challenge is to repeat it often enough that people don't assume the problem has gone away, and that they remember it because there's so much competing information, and to repeat it in a way that is sort of fresh and interesting, because oftentimes the same players, that are responsible for connecting them to the internet over here, doing it over there. And anyway, so that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. I got really into this subject around 2000, frankly, from 2000 onward. Obviously the election here in 2000 was a complete fiasco. In Volusia County, there was a machine that somehow recorded negative votes for Al Gore. I believe it was negative
16,000
votes. So clearly, if that was not, intentional tampering, it was a very serious human error and encoding that that election was won by 537 votes. So, that was, the infamous, probably the most infamous, but I think less so was the 2004 election. People you don't hear that often spoken about as a stolen election, but there's a couple documentaries about it, and to me the evidence is pretty overwhelming that it was, that there were and that the recount itself in Cuyahoga County was actually very suspect, because they were supposed to collect a random sample of these things, but what does random mean for people who work at this?
Right.
They
pre-selected the precincts.
Like pre-selected, the ones that would look like they were not, tampered with. So but this stuff has a way of just sort of moving on and disappearing into the news cycle.
Exactly.
And, so I kind of frankly, filed it away, I guess, myself. I, was doing everything I could to kind of mentally get through the Bush years. And then when Obama got elected, right, I think in some probably naive way in my mind, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, the good guy got in, fine. Everything's fine now, right? So, because clearly, like, it must have worked if he got in, right? And
I think a lot of people thought that.
And so that sort of, put it out of my head for a while. And then 2012, when he's up for re-election, we see Karl Rove's infamous meltdown on Fox News. Then you see a few articles. I think Slate had an article about maybe how Anonymous actually was counter hacking Karl Rove's hackers. None of this is
they claimed to have done it, right?
And Anonymous is, sort of claims are in general a little bit, sort of
fuzzy,
not quite sure, fuzzy and a little bit, kind of a lot of bluster. But
they come on with the mask and the music. I actually really wish that they would dial that part down, because then I think it would have been taken more seriously maybe about 2012 if they hadn't had the mask and the music.
It's super melodramatic. And I think my understanding from the limited research I've done on them is that essentially Anonymous got, busted up by the feds, and whoever was there either, is now working for the feds or, maybe is in jail. So, because you don't see a lot from them anymore. And it used to be there was these regular kind of, anyway, that's a little bit of diversion. But point being is that, 2012 is that started, I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is still a problem. And Karl Rove who is the, the king of political, dirty tricks, basically, it was like, oh, well, there he is again, trying to rig it. And then we get 2016, right? So, and then we see now from the Mueller report, there are in fact 2 counties in Florida, St. Lucie and Washington, we know were hacked. But when we say that, that doesn't mean necessarily the voting machines themselves, but the actual voter registration systems. So what have you read about that, and what's your take on it?
Sure. So 2004, by the way, is one of the elections that really drew me in. And one of the challenges in this area is, I think, to not say that they were rigged. And I really try not to say it like definitively, because I absolutely cannot prove it.
Right.
Which is sort of the whole part of the problem of our whole election system, is that we can't verify whether elections are rigged or not, because the system is rigged in a way that prevents us from doing that. So all of the evidence, which is the machines, and if there are paper ballots, not everywhere has them, but if there are, the paper ballots are in the exclusive control of the government, and the burden
Isn't
then
that
is
sort
on,
of a meta rigging, though? I mean, if the system is designed so that you cannot verify whether or not tampering has occurred, that is sort of, I mean, I'm not.
The system is rigged. I can't prove that individual elections were rigged, but there are many, many red flags, and the 2004 election is certainly one of them. And I think it is considered by many actually even more suspect in terms of the election equipment than the 2000 election. Although they both, in 2000, there were actually 2 places. Brevard apparently had 4,000 votes that got subtracted from Gore's total. And these things were corrected, so that doesn't account for it wouldn't eclipse the 537. But the thing is, we never got a statewide recount.
So these were corrected before the statewide recount happened?
Maybe during it, but no, we never got a statewide recount. My understanding is that Gore didn't even seek a statewide recount. He sought a partial recount, and and then that was blocked. So we didn't get a statewide. We don't know if there were other similar errors, but the Volusia one was caught and corrected before the result was certified, and so was, I believe, Brevard. But there may have been others, is the point, and there was never a satisfactory explanation provided. It just sort of remains a mystery. So that brought me in. The 2016 election, I mean, you were ahead of me. I was asleep at the wheel in 2004. So I only woke up to all of this in 2016, and I thought, wow, more people need to know about these red flags. And I also, as an attorney, I also know generally it takes a lot of discipline because you get worked up, to not oversell what I can prove. And so I can't prove that these elections were fraudulent, but there are a lot of the same players and a lot of the same, anomalous numbers that come out, shifts between the exit polls and the reported totals, and really corruption at the highest levels of the voting machine vending companies, which have a very pervasive control. So we were often told, for example, that our system is too decentralized to allow an outcome altering attack. That was one of the lines after 2016, but in one important way, it was complete rubbish, to use a British word, because two vendors, ES&S and Dominion Voting, account for more than 80% of US election equipment, so that if bad actors or if corrupt insiders or internet hackers were to infiltrate either of those vendors, they could absolutely change an election outcome. And so,
and that's going to be from one state. I mean, one state can flip the whole election. So it's not
can,
like
with our use of the swing states.
Country,
it was just a really odd talking point because it was so obviously, even without a deep knowledge of election security, it was obviously false on its face because of the swing. Everyone knows about the swing state in the Electoral College. But so for 2016, there was the recount, which I was not a part of, but I read about it, was where I started to realize that we didn't have a system that allowed us to verify whether election outcomes are legitimate or not, because we don't, experts say the only way to really know is to do a robust manual audit or robust or full manual recount of a reliable paper record of voter intent. And some places still don't have any paper at all. Others have paper that is not considered reliable for purposes of an audit or recount. And then on top of it, we just don't have the laws. Like even if we had all reliable paper records everywhere, most states I don't know that hardly any, maybe one or two, conduct robust manual audits, and then manual recounts are allowed only if at least at the state's expense. If they're allowed at all, it's only if they're within like a 0.5 percentage point, which is really rare. So, in 2016, they conveniently, the 3 states, I think, that were kind of the ones that came in at the last minute and tipped it, were all just barely outside the automatic recount threshold. And, even when so, and then if you go to court to seek a recount, again, you're in that position where you're supposed to prove fraud, even though you don't have access to any of the evidence to prove fraud. So I think Jill Stein filed a lawsuit to do a recount Pennsylvania in 2016. Is that right? What my understanding is that there was a group of election security experts, really respected ones, who wanted the Hillary Clinton campaign to do it, but she unfortunately had in advance of the election said publicly, I think probably even more than once, that unlike Trump, she was prepared to accept the outcome of the election. It's very similar to what we're hearing now, quite frankly, although fortunately, I don't think Biden has locked himself in to quite that extent. So she really made it really awkward for herself to try to seek a recount. And but these experts did try, and apparently they were rebuffed by her campaign. And so they got Jill Stein to do it, which was probably better than not doing it at all, but understandably, many people didn't trust Jill Stein because she had siphoned votes away from Hillary Clinton, and she'd sat with Michael Flynn and Vladimir Putin at that dinner in Russia. I certainly don't particularly trust Jill Stein, but it taught everyone a lot, or at least it taught me, and then I could teach a lot of people. It taught a lot of people about how difficult it is to get a meaningful manual recount in the United States, because it was blocked for the most part. And even where it wasn't blocked, there were, like in Michigan, they accepted the counties where votes and number of voters and number of votes mismatched were not allowed to be part of the recount under Michigan law. And if there were broken safety seals, not part of the recount. So if the number of voters and the number of votes didn't match, those were not part of the recount. Those were not allowed to be recounted. Similarly, if the security seals were broken, they were not allowed to be part of the recount. under Michigan law, and then the courts shut it down anyway after 3 days. So, and there were, I believe, a lot of machines in Michigan at that time may not have even had paper, but I'm not sure about that. Michigan does have paper now, but it still has the same really crappy, recount, and I don't think it does not conduct meaningful manual audits.
Right. So even if we could if we could completely decomputerize elections, there's still all of this legislation that's sort of prohibitive for fully transparent recounts or fully transparent audits of elections.
I think that's right. I mean, if you completely got rid of the equipment, you at least wouldn't have equipment, which is by definition opaque. You can't see what's happening inside of it. So there was a ruling in Germany in 2009 by its constitutional court that effectively said it enshrined transparency as part of German law, and said that the average voter, average citizen, has to be able to understand and be able to observe the process used to count their votes. And based on that ruling, a good portion of electronic voting was ruled unconstitutional in Germany. I mean, I'm told it's not 100%, that there may be some pockets for municipal or something where they still do use some forms of it, but touchscreen voting machines, I believe, were effectively outlawed because of that ruling. We don't even speak in terms of transparency in the US. We don't expect it. And that is a psychological hurdle to overcome for us, I think.
It's a legislative hurdle, certainly, as well, I think, because as far as I can remember, every attempt at at legislation that would make this process more transparent has been blocked.
I think that's right. And even the legislation itself isn't messaged in an effective way, and usually comes up short. So the best bill that was proposed after 2016 was written by Ron Wyden. It was the SAFE Act and the PAVE Act. One copied from the other, but so it had two different names. And it would have at least outlawed some of the new touchscreen, most of the new touchscreen voting machine systems that put votes into barcodes on it. So they have a paper record, but the record has a barcode at the top and then human readable text beneath it. But the only part that's actually counted as your vote is the barcode, and which the voters can't read. It would have outlawed those or banned them, and it would have banned remote access and wireless modems, internet connectivity for the voting machines themselves. But the GOP blocked it, and it blocked a few, and it would have required robust manual audits, but the GOP blocked it, and triumphantly blocked it. And so in terms of Russia, what it did in 2016, I mean, we still don't entirely know because our government has not been forthcoming with us, but Reality Winner did leak an NSA report. She's the 28-year-old.
She was the contractor. Was she in Georgia?
She was working in Georgia. She was working in Georgia, and she leaked the NSA report that confirmed media reports that Russia had in fact attacked our election infrastructure.
So do we only know about that because she leaked that? Basically,
well, there had been media reports about it before, but there had been no official, I don't think there had been official confirmation. There was a bipartisan letter that was signed by Obama and McConnell and a few other top leaders of both parties. But apparently McConnell refused to sign it if it mentioned Russia. So it didn't mention Russia. And for whatever reason, it also didn't mention that the Russian actors were in a position to change vote tallies. And the public was never actually told that by either administration. It wasn't even expressly indicated in the document Reality Winner released. That came out only because of the book, at least as far as I know. The first place I saw it was the book Rigged by David Scheimer, and it was 4 senior members of the Obama administration told him that they were very much in a position. Oh, Senator Harry Reid was the only one who alluded to it publicly. He wrote a letter to James Comey saying that Russian interference was more pervasive than had been reported, and it included potentially the ability to falsify election I think it's election outcomes or the election outcome, actual votes. He used some language that made it pretty clear he was talking about votes. But then the media spun it to say, oh, no, he didn't mean what it sounds like. He must have meant voter registration systems. And I think there was a concerted effort from various factions of the government with different motivations to lead the public, some to lead the public to believe that Russian actors, to the extent they could do anything, it was only the voter registration systems, which is bad enough, but not actual vote tallies. And that just wasn't true. They were in a position to alter both. I don't know about across the board, but in some places anyway, apparently they were in a position to alter vote tallies too.
Right. And so that is currently still going on. I'm going to switch over here to a Wall Street Journal report here. Russian hackers have targeted 200 groups tied to the U.S. election. This is from Tom Burt, who interestingly shares the same name, I think, as the CEO of ES&S.
That's right. There's one at Microsoft and one at ES&S.
So
different
not to
people,
be confused, this is Microsoft's
same name, different people.
VP of Consumer Safety and Trust said it's critical everyone involved in the election process be aware of these threats. This is from a month ago.
I hadn't even seen that one. This
is not. This is not 2016, is not 2018. Russian government hackers have targeted at least 200 organizations tied to 2020 U.S. election in recent weeks. This seems to be more directed towards the campaigns, state political parties, political consultants for both Republicans and Democrats. So this is still going on right now, basically. And I have seen, somewhat encouragingly, I've seen a lot more, I guess, messaging from FBI, from NSA. They've got kind of a joint, I guess, task force now that they've created in 2018 called the LISAC, which I believe, let me double check here. So they've got the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or LISAC. So this is a DHS-backed organization run out of the nonprofit CIS, Center for Internet Security. They're up in New York. Spun out of the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. CIS operates in, Greenbush, New York. So it seems like they're taking this more seriously in the federal, law enforcement community, to me.
They're willing to message the disinformation component of it, which is really important, and I'm glad to see that. What concerns me is that they are not as forthcoming about the attack on the election infrastructure.
Right.
Because, it takes a lot of effort to combat something, and as we saw with the pandemic, ignoring something, pretending it's not there, pretending it's a hoax or a conspiracy theory, doesn't make it go away. And yet, for the election infrastructure component, it doesn't get that same attention or that same level of transparency about what's happening.
Right. So you got to wonder, though, if part of why there's a lack of transparency isn't actually just that's basic cybersecurity strategy. You don't want to let the malevolent actors know that they're there. So
I don't think that explains it anymore. I think that they would like you to think that. But for example, we only know because of Bob Woodward, finally, that St. Lucie was the second county breached in 2016. There is no reason 4 years later for us not to know the name of that county. I mean, they made Florida, was it the FBI, I think, or maybe it was Florida election officials. Anyway, all of the 67 counties, the election supervisors had to sign non-disclosure agreements about hacking and just sort of across the board. And we still don't even know if it was only 2 counties, by the way. There were reports that it was 4. There is no excuse 4 years later to not declassify this information. And in fact, so I don't think that, I don't think that we can say it's because they're on it behind the scenes. I don't think they're on it. Certainly it's 2016. I don't think they're on it at all. The DHS admitted it didn't do a forensic analysis and it didn't do a federal audit. And in the book Rigged, they admitted that they could only do independent surveillance of counties and states that cooperated with them. And the vast majority of counties, they didn't have that set up before the election. So they weren't working with most counties, where if you were going to hack vote tallies, you would do it through the county election systems, not the state election systems, most likely. If you actually wanted to change the outcome, as opposed to, you could cause chaos, I guess, by doing the state systems, but it would be quite detectable.
Right. Well, we do know now, though, at least they have deployed, I believe this is verified, they've deployed what are called Albert sensors I think these are in all 67 counties in Florida. I can't be sure. I don't have those connections.
I read that. It did say that.
Yeah. So the Albert sensors basically are this is what was concerning to me on the Albert sensors. They use says right here, the Albert service uses commodity hardware to help provide a robust offering at a low cost. Anytime you're using commodity hardware, that means off the shelf. And that means it's that people, and I'm not saying, I have no information saying that these could be intercepted, but so the Albert sensors basically are, they're sensors that are designed to detect any kind of network intrusion and then send an alert to the the voter registration IT staff, I guess, or the people who are administering, county IT officials. And apparently the uptake has been pretty strong since 2018 when Isaac was formed. It seems like, but it's not universal. It's not in all counties everywhere. So I think it's like in 1,200 districts out of maybe 8 to 10,000 in the country. So it's not all there, but at least it is in Florida. So I'm somewhat encouraged by that, but how transparent they're being and like what, if they're using commodity hardware to monitor this stuff, how safe can it be? And
what kind of systems are they attached to the central tabulators that, the election management systems that handle the actual voting equipment, or is this just for the voter registration systems? Do you know?
My understanding is that this is just for the voter registration systems, and
that's mine too. And I don't believe it can stop it. They give tips for trying to stop it, but I don't think it can stop it or even tell if data was changed. And one of the things that really struck me about what happened in Florida was the FBI actually told lawmakers that they could not assess with certainty whether data had been changed. And that reminds me of the movie Kill Chain. It reminds me of the movie Kill Chain, where Hari Hursty, who's a very world-renowned election security expert, said, that's kind of the final step in the threat model, is when you can't respond, because and inability to know if they changed anything means you can't respond. So that leaves us very vulnerable, and we don't know to what extent, if at all, that has been fixed. Also, the Albert sensors don't, we don't know if they can be disconnected. I mean, what if there are plenty of members of the Republican Party that seem to be fine with Russian interference and maybe complicit in it? Can they turn it off?
Right. The kill chain model ultimately does not necessarily work if you have bad actors working inside the system.
Or
it's
even negligent
an external threat. The whole kill chain military model, it does not, I think Lockheed Martin basically kind of popularized it, but it doesn't always work. And if you have people on the inside that are, potentially malevolent actors. So, but yeah, if you look here, basically the end point of the life cycle of an Albert event is an event notification. It's like, okay, here you go. So we're just letting you know. And at that point,
and there is no agreement to tell the public. I thought it was really telling. Maybe it was in February of this year where the FBI said, okay, you know what? Good news, everybody. If we find out that there has been a breach of an election system, we're going to tell state election officials. You're welcome. Like, number one, why were they not telling them before?
Right.
And number two, they're not planning to, there's nothing about telling the public ever, like even upon conclusion of our investigation or anything. There's nothing about telling the public. And as we've seen, they aren't telling the public. I mean, again, only because of Bob Woodward do we know that they actually planted malware. Right. And what kills me is there's a lot of rewriting of history that happens when people use very careful language, people in charge, like there is no evidence that vote tallies were changed or no evidence that voter data was changed. That easily morphs into it didn't happen. They weren't changed. Yeah. And that's not what no evidence means. It means they didn't find any evidence of it. It may mean they didn't look. It can mean lots of things. But I even see large accounts that I admire on other issues with the blue check marks and everything, resistance accounts, for example, that have morphed that message into, well, thank goodness they didn't change vote totals or voter data, but it's a risk. And the truth is we don't know that. And I think it matters because it speaks to the lack of transparency of our system, which leaves us very vulnerable again in 2020. There's a quote, and I wish I could easily say that it was Thomas Jefferson, but I researched it and it's not entirely clear. He said something similar, that an informed electorate is the best defense against tyranny. And I think that's really true. If you have a system where the public, only the government officials and private vendors get to know if there's a problem, that's a problem for that. I mean,
that's a big problem.
That's leaving it open to abuse. It doesn't mean it necessarily has been abused, but it's kind of just luck that if it hasn't happened yet, that would be just luck. And I think it would be naive to think it hasn't happened. Yeah.
I mean, okay, to maybe play the part of somebody working as an election official or a federal law enforcement agent, what if people were allowed to see everything, and what if everybody wanted to? Say you had a result that a bunch of Proud Boys, for example, really didn't like the result of a certain election, and we're like, we want to see everything, or Democrats or Greens, and you've got 1,000 people descending upon an election supervisor's office saying, hey, we have the right to see everything that happened. I mean, that in theory could cause a lot of just societal pandemonium. So
that's why our system needed to be fixed. And it's a shame. And that's what we tried to dial back, for example, the use of electronic equipment. Many counties doubled up on it, and that makes it really almost impossible to show to prove that election outcomes are legitimate, or even to disprove false claims of election rigging. It leaves you vulnerable on both ends. And vote by mail is a whole other dynamic, but I posted a really good thread by one of the co-chairs of the National Voting Rights Task Force named Jim Soper. I'm a member of the National Voting Rights Task Force. And he posted a thread which explained how the notion that foreign actors could mail in hundreds of thousands or millions of fake absentee ballots is logistically really not possible, because even within counties there are so many different ballot styles that they would have to know all the different ballot styles for each individual place to be able to do it. And I should add that they also have to hack the voter registration system in order to get them accepted if they're going to be completely fake voters, which Trump doesn't want to mention.
That's an extreme logistical challenge,
Right.
Probably.
It would actually be easier to just do it with the in-person voting totals. And now that they have electronic poll books, it would also be easier to hack those as well, because those often connect to Wi-Fi or the internet to add fake voters, and then you can add fake votes. It's easier to, it would be easier to do it that way. And I think we do need that full transparency, but it is late in the day, and trying to provide it now, which will only, I think, show that we don't have really transparent systems. Like, to try to show the transparency would really probably show many of the flaws. It is a very, very dangerous situation to be in. In general, though, when we talk about transparency, we don't mean bogus claims of, we don't mean not credible claims of fraud, like the notion that millions of people would risk going to prison to individually, impersonate another voter is not likely. Yes, some people absolutely do it. Some people from both parties absolutely do it. But it is not as great of a threat as having a single actor, or one or two on the inside, who can change an entire county or an entire state from a centralized election management system.
Right. I wanted to play a clip on that sort of deals a little bit with what we've been talking about, and specifically, this is a clip from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, supervisor of elections for Broward County, Peter Antonacci, and then Miami-Dade County's supervisor of elections, Christina White. So let me just play this, and it's about 4 minutes, but bear with me because I think it's worth everybody's time to see this. So.
We've had a lot of modernizations, and technology is changing all the time. And we've had hacking concerns as well, from foreign actors that unfortunately have
not in Broward,
in Broward
or Dade.
It's the information I have is classified, so I'm not sure what the folks have told you, but
wow.
All right, so what does that mean, right? It just
seems to be implying that it's Broward and Dade.
She's like, I can't tell you, but so that right there set off alarm bells. Anyway, I'm going to keep going with it, but that right there was like,
wow. Yeah, I hadn't seen that either. Go ahead.
They were, more. So, all right.
Oh, the information
I in our ears if you know anything, because we don't.
So if I tell you or anyone else, I'd have to kill you, and they'd probably kill me. But what modernizations and protections have you put in place since the 2016 election to keep the voting process reliable, quick, and secure?
So the first thing that the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Guard, and all the cyber experts tell us is never give the robbers the alarm code. So you'll be very hard pressed to get any of us to talk to you about the specifics of what it is that we're doing to protect our systems, but simply to say that we are part of a very strong and wide consortium of partners that share information, which is, as you would know, the most important piece of it. Miami-Dade has invested millions of dollars between grant funding and also general fund money from the county on a variety of applications.
All right, hold on. I just want to pause.
They're saying trust us.
Look at this dude.
Who the hell are they?
First of all, look at this dude like muting, talking off camera, and just totally like disrespecting his colleagues. I want to call this out. All right. This is the supervisor of elections appointed by Rick Scott in Broward County. Basically just totally ignoring and disrespecting
smug
people,
and disrespectful.
Talking about the most important topic about our elections. So just there you go. Anyway.
Monitoring and detection software, servers that would alert us if there was any suspicious activity that was seen. And so we're proud about keeping up with all of that and, you know, continue to invest and react as needed and new products become available. I also feel very fortunate in my county that I have the support of what's called the Information Technology Department for the entire county, who supports the water and sewer, the police department, the airport. And so we're able to utilize those cyber and physical security experts as well to make sure that we are.
Okay, I want to pause again.
What county is she in again?
She's Miami-Dade. She's supervisor of elections for
Miami-Dade. Okay.
And she's like, what I want to call the Internet Information Tech. Oh, really? Is that what it's called? The IT department? Thanks for that highly specialized, you know, okay.
Well, what's just struck me is they're saying it's all fine because people on the inside, we get to know the information, but you don't. And how are we supposed to trust? Why should we have to trust them? The more electronics you use, the more you run into that. So for example, the most transparent election you could have is publicly counted on election night, hand-marked paper ballots. Members of both parties counting them in public on election, so you have no chain of custody. Our ballots are really long. There are really no nationally renowned experts who advocate for publicly hand counting. I actually wish they were. Initially, that was where I started out. I've never actually seen a hand counted election, so I couldn't be that person. I kind of wanted to be, but having not seen one, I can't. When somebody tells me, "Oh, trust me, I've seen a million of them. It's way too complicated. It'll never work." Yeah. But that is what transparency means, and many Western.
I think that's the only option.
Well, some Western democracies actually do that. It's not really. Let me finish. I'm sorry. Let me finish. It's not really an option in the sense that it would take, because our ballots are so long in some places like California, especially, is what's always brought up. They have at least 50 items on the ballot. Maybe it's even more than that. So it would take weeks to do it, and you'd have people not being able to sleep through the night. So immediately you get to the chain of custody, which immediately creates a transparency issue. But it could be done. It could be done as to, say, federal races and maybe statewide races. That could be done, and then the rest would be would have to be done later with as much transparency as you can provide once the chain of custody is no longer in the public eye.
Okay. Which
is sort of what Canada does, by the way. So for example, they publicly hand count their elections. Members of the public do it, but for city races, they do not. They use scanners.
Okay. I just want to do another couple minutes on this. I want to play this clip in its entirety so people can see it. So
are safe. But I think the most important thing in this context is really to make sure that voters know that in the tabulation system that we operate on what's called a closed network. There is no internet access to our tabulation system. And so when you do hear about interference or attempts at interference, those are really more internet-based conversations. The tabulation system is closed. And so there really is no opportunity for tampering. And we do penetration testing regularly to confirm that is in fact the case. And at the end of the day, the best thing that we always...
Okay, first of all, you cannot pen test a closed network. All right. If you're pen testing a network, that's by definition you're trying to access something that has network access. So
say too is that we vote.
When was this video?
This is like last week.
any
Whoa.
kind of concern,
Yeah.
we have a record of every voter's vote that we can go back to should we ever need to.
And they can just
It's just not true. What she's saying is just not true. It was already debunked. I mean, by reporting by Kim Zetter, and their vendor is probably ES&S. I don't know. There's maybe there's
It is.
Yeah,
ES&S.
the ES&S, I mean, their own internal documents show that their modems connect the scanners to the internet, and they also connect the county central tabulators to the internet. That was what experts found and was reported on NBC News, and she's just reporting vendor talking points.
Yep, that's what it sounds like to me. So let me continue here.
If need be.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Pete and Howard?
Check. Along the way. We in Broward have purchased every little snick and piece of software that has been recommended to us by the security people. And
who are they?
We
don't know.
in close contact with them all the time, and but it should come as no surprise to people that people are trying to invade your space. It's an everyday event in the commercial world.
Right.
When I was
at least he's honest there.
We averaged in excess of 1,000 attempts a day to get into our system, and that's pretty serious too with respect to flood control. So people that are sitting in their grandmama's cellar in their underwear, people that Chaicoms somewhere, somebody in Tajikistan, people are doing it all day. What we have to do is to be mindful of that and to have everything available that the government recommends to us to make sure that our voter registration system is safe.
Voter register. He only mentioned the voter registration system there. That's weird.
Right.
Well, it's just a slip probably.
Yeah. Sorry for the lengthy clip, but I felt like it was important to show at length, what these are the people who we are entrusting, and to be fair,
I want that link, by the way. If you could send it to me later, I need that link. That's just crazy what the Miami-Dade lady was saying, that they don't connect to the internet. It's already been debunked. I guess she missed
to her credit, I think Christina White has done a good job. She is, I think, and it seems to me, I don't know her, but seems to be an ethical and well-intentioned career civil servant who does not seem to be, at least she's not chewing gum and talking off camera to her colleagues like the other guy here. But he
at least acknowledged that there are real threats out there, but
but he's just sort of like, earlier in this interview, he's just sort of like, no, there's gonna be no problems, everything's good, we're fine, just
so he loves being the gatekeeper of it. That was very clear. He enjoys being the one who gets to know if they're fine or not.
Right.
So the problem with both of what they're saying is, and they may very well be well intentioned, I'm not saying that they're not, but they are repeating. It's not a problem just in Florida, but the vendors have the primary access to the election officials. They talk to them all the time, and they tell them things like these don't connect to the internet, which isn't true. Mm-hmm. And she's not doing a good job if they have the modems still in their precinct ballot scanners. That's not doing a good job by definition, according to many, many experts, pretty much all of them. Even experts that I disagree with on other issues that are more lax on things like touchscreens, even they have said these modems should have been removed, and they haven't been removed. And if she's planning on using them, that's even worse. And Antonacci, I don't want to go light on him. But what I want to say also is Florida, one of the biggest problems with Florida is that, it does have paper ballots, by the way, even the hand marked kind. So it's not a touch screen. So it initially was not on my radar. The modems, when I remembered that they're modeming the results, that put it back on my radar. And then when I remembered that they don't have meaningful manual recount laws, it really got on my radar. So even they call them manual recounts in Florida, but I noticed this in 2018 with Nielsen and Gillum. I was looking at the recount laws. They only manually recount overvotes and undervotes. So those votes were a voter.
DeSantis and Gillum? Or did both Nelson and Gillum both have recounts?
Well, I was looking at it in connection with both of their races. That's all.
Okay.
Even when they do what they call a manual recount, it's mostly a rescan. So you're mostly scanning it. You just end up repeating the same concern about electronic vulnerabilities and insiders or outsiders as you had to begin with. And so their manual recounts are rubbish. And then on top of it, they don't have their manual audits are also no good. They're again,
what's the difference for people who don't know? And I think I might be one of them. What's the difference between an audit and a recount?
So a recount is where you typically a recount refers to a manual recount, but as we've learned, you have to be really specific or somebody will game the system. So a manual recount is where you physically have people hand counting all of the paper records.
Okay.
Then all of them. So that's a recount. An audit is less than all of them. So it shouldn't take as long. And there are many different audit protocols. Unfortunately, according to experts, most of them come down to just a dog and pony show. Basically, right, to give public confidence where it isn't necessarily warranted, at least not based on their audit. To say, oh, we audited it, it's fine. But so according to experts, the only way to know if an electronic outcome is legitimate is to have a reliable paper record of voter intent. Usually that would be a hand-marked paper ballot, and to physically hand count that in either a full recount or a robust, like a really stringent manual audit. So it's maybe not all of the ballots, but there are, chain of custody protocols, and it's done at random, and there are lots of different criteria, but they don't do that in Florida or really anywhere, or most anywhere. I think Colorado is doing it. So they're at the forefront of that. And, Georgia pretended to do it, but they're only I am told by people who would know that they're only planning to do one audit every 2 years, and it's going to be selected by the Secretary of State. So even if all other aspects of it are really robust, I mean, the Secretary of State is one of the biggest vote suppressors in the country. He could just pick whatever race they decide to throw to the Democrats and have that one be audited every 2 years. So that's kind of what I mean by a dog and pony show. They'll say, oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. So Florida, they don't do manual audits. They do rescans for an audit of a subset of the whole.
Right, and what we saw in 2004 or 2005, whenever Harry Hursty did the hack, I should clarify that Harry Hursty was this Finnish computer security expert that was called in to help basically game out how could, I think it was Leon County's in Florida's, how could their system possibly be hacked if he did not have access to the actual machine. And he, with only accessing this AccuVote memory card, he was able to basically put an exe file, an executable program on it that changed the vote total. And they had this on film in this movie called Hacking Democracy by Bev Harris, and it showed they hand marked all their ballots. There were the question was, can Diebold systems be hacked by a person only accessing the macro? It was a one question election. There were 6 no votes because everybody wanted to believe, like, let's say it's no, and then 2 yes. He, with only accessing that memory card, flipped the whole result of that election to 7 no votes and 1 yes vote instead of 6 no votes and basically completely flipped the results of that election. Didn't touch the machines. All he did was put a program onto the memory card. So if anybody had access to the memory cards, it doesn't matter if you rescan all of these paper marked ballots. If somebody can,
that's right. And by the way, the Volusia County in 2000, that was attributed to a memory card issue, and there were reports that there was a second memory card. There wasn't supposed to be a second one. So, and that was never really explained, like a phantom second memory card. Internal Diebold memos, I believe, that were leaked to Beverly Harris is where that was the reference to that was made. And that was Harry Hursty is who you're referring to. He's still very active. He's one of the co-chairs of the DEF CON Hacking Village. And he very much advocates election transparency, by which to build trust in the election, public trust in the election system. So having election officials up there saying, just trust us, especially if they're with the opposing party, but really regardless, because corruption knows no bounds. It might lean one way or the other, but it knows there are corrupt people, I'm sure, and no matter what your political leaning is. it does not inspire confidence.
Right. I mean, we should mention that this is not just a Democrats or liberal progressive problem. I mean, the Republicans can get burned by this too, and this is not, in my opinion, this is a problem that everybody should be concerned with, because, everybody wants to think that their vote counts.
And I do think that Republican voters are quite concerned with it. Unfortunately, the ones in office are the ones who most frequently block election security legislation and have blocked efforts to have paper with the machines. But the Democrats have not been as good as they could have on this either. And I think we really are in this cycle where no one wants to talk about it because they think it undermines trust in elections. And so they don't talk about it much in these hearings. And then the lawmakers themselves are ignorant. And so they think they can't be hacked, or they don't advocate as strongly as they should. And Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer were the only two senators who voted against the Help America Vote Act in 2002, which allocated $3 billion for new voting equipment and did not include a requirement that there be any kind of paper record of voter intent to check against the electronic total. Those were the only two senators that voted against it. So, but I will say I did a historical dive, and it has been mostly Republicans who have blocked efforts then to add meaningful paper to the machines. Unfortunately, it is not only Republicans. Shouldn't really be anyone. So yeah, here we are.
Well, and so obviously right now it's too late to do anything for this election. Nothing is going to happen as far as any kind of legislation or change.
Legislatively, it's too late.
But there is. I did want to bring up. You mentioned a website is this some an affiliate of yours who's CSAY2020.com. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? And I can.
Sure. It's not just CSAY. There are 8 transparency projects going on right now, but CSAY2020.com is one I only came to learn about recently. I absolutely support it. I was mentioned on their press release. My group protectourvotes.com was mentioned. They have an interactive map, and the idea is that voters, and whatever the problems they encounter, if it's glitchy voting machines, or they go to the polls and they're saying that they're not registered when they really are, or they see Nazis at their polling place intimidating voters, whatever it is, they can report it on this website, CSAY2020.com, and they have people there who they do vet the claims. I'm sure there will be some mistakes.
I would hope.
They do make an attempt to actually vet the claims, and then they put them on the map, which is the public can view, and it uses Esri, which I gather is a platform that is very difficult to that's considered very secure and isn't going to crash. But they put it on their map, and what's really important about that is it puts it all in one place so that the public can see it, and so that it can be used as evidence later on, because they do collect people's, you have to agree to do it, but they do get phone numbers and contact information, but they keep those private from the public map. Doesn't show who the people were that reported it. But if later on, if an election protection group wants to file a lawsuit, they can reach those people who have agreed to let themselves be contacted to discuss what it was they observed and get affidavits and things. It's incredibly important. I actually was trying to, not super strong, but I did try briefly to get Amazon interested in doing a similar concept, but without the map. So this is actually much better than what I was thinking of. But I knew that the hotlines, like election protection hotline, I advertise it everywhere, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. They can help you with problems at the polls, but they do not make their numbers public. And so, that doesn't do much for collecting evidence, and it doesn't do much for transparency. And so, although I think they have a very important role to play, and I continue to amplify their hotline, we needed something where the problems could be logged and made public and possibly used as evidence. And I was hoping Amazon would do it, and then the person who had contacted me lost interest, and then I heard about this, and it's better than what I was envisioning. So,
well, interesting. A tidbit about Amazon is that the Albert Sensor Network and their I believe has now been ported over to Amazon Web Services. It's a cloud-based system now instead of only just these physical sensors, because as I understand it, CIS basically ran out of storage space or hardware space at their location in New York. Right. And so, and that gets into a whole other question of cloud computing and, Microsoft and Amazon both hosting now the networks that are involved in monitoring election security, and now Microsoft is also in that game now too. Amazon and Microsoft are constantly vying for different government contracts, as you may know, and so they're both now big players in what's emerging as the election security sector, I guess. But anyway,
right. Can I just run through real quick the other projects? Sure. So I don't ever want to suggest that it's hopeless going in. I think actually we will have more eyes on this election than any other election in the past. So it will be, in some ways, there are more transparency efforts citizen-led than in the past. There are a lot of them. So poll tape reviews. Even if you had paperless machines, all of them, voting machines, all of them at the end of voting produce a paper record that lists all of the vote totals from the machines. Now, we can't say whether those themselves are legitimate. However, they have to send the totals then to the county central tabulators, and the central tabulators are the ones that sometimes connect to the internet. Well, so do the scanners, but they're a big attack vector because they're attack vector for hackers. And so you want to make sure that totals at least don't change after they leave the precincts and are then reported by the county officially later on. And if you photograph the poll tapes after the polls close and compare them to the reported totals, you can make that determination and then proceed accordingly with more investigation if there are discrepancies, which there should not be. ProtectOurVotes.com, we have almost 300 volunteers, but we actually want to triple that for the election. And democracycounts.org has focused largely on Florida and Broward County, so that's another organization that's doing it. Post-election affidavit audits, cooperation.org is going to conduct these. So after the election, they're going to look for areas with problematic precincts that have really anomalous results, like more votes than voters and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then they are literally going to go door to door, probably not that many precincts, but at a few of them, and get voters' affidavits to see whether they can find discrepancies that way. And I think that could be very helpful in Florida and maybe somewhere like Georgia. Mm-hmm. Another possibility is although the modems can't be removed anymore, we could at least have state election officials or county election officials making the decision to not use them and reminding everyone to confirm that the county central tabulators are not connected to the internet and to disconnect them if they are. And Susan Pinchon, who is an election security advocate in Florida, at Susan Pinchon 1, Pinchon 1, is writing letters to all of the supervisors of election asking them not to use the modems in Florida. And I'm sure she could use help with that. I've talked to her about it and she said she could. Mm-hmm. And then scrutineers.org has a special Florida circle that is working on various projects, including ensuring that there will be a meaningful backup paper poll books for electronic poll books in Florida, because Florida law does not actually require that, unlike most of the other swing states that at least require some form of backup. Mm-hmm. Florida is the exception. So they're looking into that. Anyway, those are just
yours. Yeah. I will post a list to all of the if you wouldn't mind actually sending me that, I'll post that in the chat later for people to be able to check those out.
Sure. And I should I would be remiss to not mention Audit USA's work as well. They have worked really hard to get digital ballot images, to get officials in Florida to commit to preserving them. I think about half the state is going to preserve them. They are automatically created by scanners when the ballots go through, and the idea is that if you preserve them and make them public, then members of the public can do their own comparison to see if it matches what the official total is supposed to be. But officials destroy them frequently, and so Audit USA at least got them to commit to preserving them in the event of a recount, presidential recount, the overvotes and undervotes. So they're doing a lot of important transparency work around ballot images.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for all that and for providing a little bit of a ray of hope in, what is a very otherwise troubling kind of scenario here. And I certainly hope that the feds are doing as much as they say that they're doing. I certainly hope that Christina White is correct in her assertion. I and that ultimately at this point is what it comes down to. We all we can really do is be vigilant and trust what our elected officials say that they're doing. But I just want them to know, whoever's watching, that we are watching you, and we are going to be scrutinizing this election incredibly closely. So you better be doing what you're saying, because everybody on all sides of the aisle is concerned about tampering and voter suppression. And, and frankly, we're tired of it. I've been dealing with it for 20 years. You guys need to get your shit together, and we need to fix this once and for all. We cannot have this problem of just getting kicked down the road endlessly, so let's do this. And sorry for my kind of rant, but it's just it's really mind-boggling that we're still dealing with this like 20 years later after.
You're gonna love this though. You're gonna love this. Hang on, I forgot one of the groups. This is good. Dang it, I'm trying to find it. It's the Columbus Institute of Contemporary Journalism. They've sent out requests to every county and every swing state asking for as detailed information as possible about election equipment, security protocols, and who specifically is doing the programming and implementing the security protocols, so that these people do know that somebody is watching, that they're watching. Yeah. And it's an interesting project, and they have already been receiving responses, and yes, Florida is included. And yeah, people do need to know that they're watching. And what concerns me also isn't just that, that they're going to know if something goes wrong. Will they tell the public, and will we be able to recover from it? Like, that's what we have to really look for too. It's not just a matter of, we found out that there were intrusions, but are we just going to say there's nothing we can do about it and confirm another unverified election outcome?
Right.
That would be an unacceptable result. So
yeah,
we need as many eyes as possible, and a lot of help on these transparency projects. If people are interested, they should really look into it, because it's exciting and it's interesting, and I think it can make a difference.
Cool. Well, I think we're pushing up on I don't know, maybe I'm not sure exactly.
3 hours.
Yeah, this is going to be like a Joe Rogan length podcast. But you know what? It's a very pertinent subject right now, and I'm happy that you were able to take the time and come discuss it with me. It's been really enlightening and really encouraging that there are so many resources out there now. So. Yeah, I would love to talk again, maybe after the election, and see what happens. I certainly plan on being, more involved in this going forward. So, anything else that you want to say before we kind of wrap it up here?
The only other thing I want to say is that I'm very worried that with so much focus on the presidency that we're ignoring down ballot races, and they are so important. State races in particular are really important because they will vote on the new maps that will decide whether our country keeps gerrymandering Republicans into office. And so I'm worried we need transparency and a lot of scrutiny if there are unexpected state losses as well.
Okay.
Yes. And county. I mean, everything down ballot is very, very important as well. It's not just the presidency.
100% agree.
All eyes on every race.
Yeah. Very, very, very important. So, well, Jennifer, thank you so much. This has really been great. And I hope that everybody else watching finds it as riveting and interesting as I did. So thank you very much for your time, and hope to connect again soon. And thanks for all that you do. Really, really much appreciated.
Well, thank you. It's great talking to you.
Okay. Take care.